Ever notice how some Rick and Morty characters just hit different when you're trying to fall asleep? Those quiet moments with Mr. Poopybutthole somehow feel like a warm blanket wrapping around your tired mind, while Bird Person's calm wisdom seems to slow your racing thoughts after a long day. I spent 3 months collecting the most soothing scenes from the show's best secondary characters, removing all the chaos and screaming moments that would jolt you awake. This 2.5-hour journey through their most peaceful moments is specifically designed to help animation fans drift off while still feeling connected to the universe they love. Have you ever noticed how Mr. Poopybutthole speaks in this uniquely gentle rhythm that somehow slows your racing thoughts? Behind that silly name lies one of Rick and Morty's most genuinely wholesome characters, a friend who never betrays, never disappoints, and somehow manages to create an island of calm in the show's otherwise chaotic universe. Mr. Poopybutthole first appeared in the infamous Total Rickle episode, where parasitic aliens implanted false memories in the Smith family. In a brilliant twist, the one character who seemed most like an obvious parasite turned out to be completely real. So real that when Beth shot him, it created one of the show's most shocking moments. What's remarkable isn't just that he survived, but how he responded afterward. Most characters in Rick and Morty harbor grudges, plot revenge, or spiral into bitterness after being wronged. Not Mr. Poopybutthole. Despite being shot and severely injured by Beth, he never once expresses anger or resentment toward her or the family. This absence of bitterness creates something rare in the show's universe, a character who embodies forgiveness rather than perpetuating cycles of pain. This quality becomes even more apparent when you pay attention to his distinctive speech pattern. Voice actor Tom Kenny approaches the character with an intentional focus on maintaining a gentle, soothing tone that stands in stark contrast to the frantic energy of most other characters. The rhythm of his speech has an almost hypnotic quality. Words flow at a consistent pace with subtle rises and falls that mirror techniques used in ASMR content. When Mr. Poopybutthole speaks, the show's pace naturally slows down. There's something about his cadence that invites listeners to breathe more deeply and let their guard down. Unlike Rick's rapid-fire cynicism or Morty's anxious stammering, his measured delivery creates space for reflection. This isn't just a coincidence. It's a deliberate performance choice that transforms scenes where he appears. What makes this character even more fascinating is how his philosophy manifests not just in words, but in actions. After his recovery from Beth's gunshot, we see him building a life, getting married, having a child, pursuing education, and maintaining relationships. Each milestone represents another step in a journey defined not by resentment over past trauma, but by moving forward and creating something positive. In a show often defined by characters who remain stuck in destructive patterns, his capacity for growth stands out. The evolution of Mr. Poopybutthole from mysterious friend to fully realized character with his own family narrative provides a rare through line of wholesome development. While many characters in the show reset to their default toxic behaviors episode after episode, his arc shows genuine progression. We see him celebrate achievements, nurture relationships, and build a life outside the Smith family's chaos, all while maintaining his fundamentally kind nature. This character creates something special whenever he appears on screen, a noticeable tonal shift toward quiet reflection. Notice how during family gatherings or supportive moments with other characters, the frantic pace of the show typically slows down. The background music often becomes more subdued, the color palette softens slightly, and the editing allows scenes to breathe. His presence signals to viewers that this is a moment to pause and absorb rather than brace for another chaotic adventure. What's particularly interesting about Mr. Poopybutthole is how his specific vocal qualities might be triggering actual relaxation responses in viewers. The consistent rhythm of his speech creates a predictable pattern that our brains find soothing. Unlike characters whose emotional volatility keeps viewers on edge, his steady presence allows our nervous systems to downregulate. There's a reason why people often mention his scenes as favorites to rewatch when they're feeling anxious or having trouble sleeping. Research into why certain characters help viewers relax suggests that consistency is key. Characters with predictable speech patterns and forgiving natures create a sense of psychological safety. When we encounter a character like Mr. Poopybutthole, who maintains his gentle demeanor regardless of circumstances, it signals to our subconscious that it's safe to lower our guard. This is precisely the mental state that helps prepare the mind for sleep, a feeling that whatever chaos exists in the world, there's still room for kindness and recovery. This effect is amplified by his life philosophy of forgiveness and moving forward. In a show that often embraces nihilism and cosmic meaninglessness, Mr. Poopybutthole offers a counterpoint. The idea that even in a chaotic multiverse, how we treat others still matters. His continued friendship with the Smith family, despite their role in his trauma models, a form of emotional resilience that viewers find deeply comforting. The characters' peaceful scenes particularly stand out because of how they contrast with the show's typical energy. Moments where he's simply enjoying time with family or engaged in ordinary activities create little oases of tranquility. These scenes often feature minimal dialogue, allowing his calming presence to take center stage. The rhythm of these quieter moments gives viewers a chance to process the more intense aspects of the show. What makes Mr. Poopybutthole so effective as a calming presence is that his wholesomeness never feels saccharine or forced. He's not immune to pain or struggling. We see him work through physical therapy after being shot, navigate relationship challenges, and face disappointments. His optimism comes not from naivety, but from a conscious choice to focus on what's good despite acknowledging what's difficult. This authentic balance makes his peaceful nature all the more compelling. For viewers struggling with racing thoughts at bedtime, scenes featuring Mr. Poopybutthole offer something valuable. A character whose consistent speech patterns and gentle philosophy create a psychological environment conducive to relaxation. The predictability of his reactions, the soothing quality of his voice, and the forgiveness he models all work together to signal to our nervous systems that it's safe to unwind and prepare for sleep. From forgiveness, we move to acceptance. Bird Person represents the other side of emotional healing. His measured, deliberate speech creates natural pauses that might be doing something surprising to your nervous system. When this character speaks about existence and mortality, he's not just sharing wisdom, he's actually triggering the same brain response as professional meditation guides. Bird Person stands as Rick's oldest friend in the multiverse, a stoic warrior whose calm demeanor serves as the perfect counterbalance to Rick's chaotic energy. With his wings folded behind him and his expressionless face, Bird Person embodies a philosophy of radical acceptance that feels almost supernatural in a show where most characters react with explosive emotion to the universe's challenges. What makes Bird Person particularly fascinating is how he maintains this tranquil presence despite having every reason not to. Consider his backstory. A warrior who fought alongside Rick in a bloody rebellion, witnessed countless deaths, and then experienced the ultimate betrayal when his wife Tammy revealed herself as a Federation agent on their wedding day. These experiences would embitter most characters, yet Bird Person's response is not anger but a deeper commitment to acceptance. Bird Person's speech pattern is where we find his most potent sleep-inducing quality. Unlike the rapid-fire dialogue that dominates most of Rick and Morty, Bird Person speaks with deliberate pauses between each phrase. This creates a natural rhythm that unconsciously encourages viewers to synchronize their breathing with his speech pattern. The effect is similar to guided breathing exercises, where the pause between sentences naturally extends the exhale, the part of breathing most associated with activating the parasympathetic nervous system. "The flesh is a temple," he tells Morty in one scene, his voice never rising above its monotone baseline. "The universe is an equation, and it balances eventually." These aren't just philosophical musings. They're delivered in a vocal pattern that creates a meditation-like state for the viewer. In episodes where Bird Person appears, the writing team often uses his character to deliver the show's most profound observations about existence. While Rick's nihilistic view sees the universe as meaningless chaos, Bird Person offers something more nuanced, an acceptance that pain is inevitable but not purposeless. His wisdom doesn't deny suffering, but contextualizes it within a larger framework of existence that feels oddly comforting. The evolution of Bird Person's philosophy becomes even more interesting after his resurrection as Phoenix Person. Having literally died and returned, his perspective deepens from mere acceptance to something approaching transcendence. Where earlier bird person accepted life's hardships stoically, phoenix person seems to understand them as necessary components of growth. This evolution offers viewers a rare glimpse of character development that centers around peace rather than conflict. One of the most unexpected developments in bird person's character arc is his relationship with his daughter. The revelation that he has a child softens him in ways that don't compromise his fundamental tranquility. Instead, we see his stoicism expand to include nurturing, his monotone voice taking on the slightest hint of warmth when addressing her. This combination of unchanging vocal delivery with emotionally significant content creates a fascinating contrast that draws viewers deeper into a relaxed state. What's particularly interesting about bird person from a sleep science perspective is how his voice specifically affects human physiology. Research suggests that monotone, low-register voices like his activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode that counteracts stress and anxiety. When bird person speaks, the lack of variation in pitch signals to our primitive brain that there's no threat present, allowing tension to dissipate naturally. This effect is stronger than you might imagine. Studies have shown that voices with minimal tonal variation actually outperform many guided meditation apps in activating the brain's relaxation center. The reason is evolutionary. Consistent, low-pitched sounds signal safety in our environment, while sudden variations alert us to potential danger. Bird person's unwavering vocal delivery essentially hacks this primitive system, creating a perfect audio environment for pre-sleep viewing. What makes these scenes particularly effective is that they're not trying to be relaxing. Unlike deliberately calming content that can sometimes feel forced, bird person's philosophical observations come wrapped in genuinely engaging storytelling. Viewers can be intellectually stimulated by his wisdom, while physically responding to the soothing qualities of his voice. A perfect combination for transitioning to sleep. The animation style during bird person scenes often complements this effect. Notice how the camera movement slows down, the color palette becomes slightly more muted, and the background music thins out when he speaks. These subtle production choices amplify the calming effect of his character, creating moments of tranquility within even the most action-packed episodes. There's also something deeply reassuring about bird person's absolute acceptance of reality. In a show where characters often fight against their circumstances or try to manipulate reality with science, bird person simply acknowledges what is. This acceptance modeling can be particularly helpful for viewers struggling with racing thoughts before sleep. It offers a template for letting go of the day's worries rather than wrestling with them. Some of bird person's most profound quotes throughout the series reflect this theme of acceptance. When he discusses the nature of existence or the inevitability of change, he's not just delivering philosophical content, he's demonstrating a way of being that viewers can absorb through mere exposure. The psychological term for this is state matching, where we unconsciously adopt the emotional state of characters we're engaging with. The effectiveness of bird person as a sleep aid becomes even more apparent when we consider the neuroscience behind it. His monotone delivery activates the same brain regions associated with meditation and mindfulness practices. The consistent low-register voice creates a sound environment that signals safety to the primitive brain, allowing higher cognitive functions to quiet down in preparation for sleep. It's almost as if his voice serves as an audio version of a weighted blanket, applying gentle, consistent pressure that soothes rather than stimulates. For viewers who struggle with an overactive mind at bedtime, bird person offers something uniquely valuable: philosophical depth delivered in a way that physically calms the nervous system. His scenes provide both intellectual satisfaction and physiological relaxation, making them particularly effective for those who find their thoughts racing with unanswerable questions before sleep. Unlike bird person's transcendent calm, Jerry Smith's constant parade of failures should be the last thing anyone would find relaxing. Yet something unexpected happens in our brains when we witness his bumbling attempts at basic competence. There's a peculiar comfort in watching someone whose life is perpetually unraveling at the seams, especially when we're trying to quiet our own anxious minds before sleep. Jerry Smith occupies a unique position in the Rick and Morty universe. While practically every other character possesses extraordinary abilities, interdimensional knowledge, or at least basic competence, Jerry remains stubbornly, painfully ordinary. He's the show's designated punching bag. A man who can't open pickle jars gets fired from advertising jobs for pitching Hungry for Apples, which is just a rip-off of Got Milk, and regularly faces humiliation from every direction. Yet somehow, watching Jerry Smith fail spectacularly at life becomes a strangely soothing experience. What makes this phenomenon particularly interesting is that by conventional logic, witnessing someone else's stress and embarrassment should trigger our own discomfort. Jerry's life is essentially a parade of anxiety-inducing situations, from being belittled by his father-in-law to facing unemployment to navigating a rocky marriage. These are precisely the kinds of scenarios that might fuel our own late-night worry spirals. So why do many viewers report finding Jerry's scenes particularly comforting before bedtime? The answer lies partly in Jerry's remarkable journey from complete doormat to someone who occasionally stands his ground. Throughout the series, we witness small moments of growth where Jerry asserts his needs while still maintaining the vulnerability that makes him so relatable. These aren't dramatic transformations. Jerry never suddenly becomes cool or capable, but rather authentic moments where a chronically insecure person finds small pockets of courage. There's something genuinely comforting about watching someone face their inadequacy and occasionally triumph in tiny, imperfect ways. Jerry finds genuine joy in the simplest pleasures, creating moments of pure contentment that stand in stark contrast to the cosmic chaos surrounding him. His coin collection isn't just a throwaway joke. It represents how Jerry creates meaning and satisfaction in his life through modest, attainable goals. When he pitches Hungry for Apples, with childlike enthusiasm, we're not just witnessing failure. We're seeing someone who can still get excited about small creative endeavors despite a lifetime of disappointment. There's a lesson in Jerry's ability to find happiness in these minor achievements that feels particularly relevant when we're lying in bed worrying about our own inadequacies. One of the most revealing aspects of Jerry's character emerges in his relationship with Doofus Rick. When presented with the one version of Rick who treats him with kindness and respect, Jerry's childlike enthusiasm bursts forth. He eagerly shows off his collection, beams with pride at simple compliments, and reveals a capacity for genuine connection that's usually stifled by criticism. These scenes offer viewers a respite from the show's typical cynicism. Watching someone experience uncomplicated happiness, even briefly, creates a psychological safe space that's particularly conducive to relaxation. What's especially interesting about Jerry's character is how his struggles with marriage and parenting, while played for laughs, often contain emotional depths that resonate on a profound level. His awkward attempts to connect with his children reveal both his limitations and his genuine love. When Jerry tries and fails to protect his family, there's something touching about his persistence despite his obvious incompetence. These moments transcend mere comic relief and tap into something fundamentally human about continuing to show up despite repeated failure. A sentiment that can be oddly reassuring when we're battling our own feelings of inadequacy at the end of the day. Chris Parnell, the voice actor behind Jerry, brings a specific quality to the character that enhances this effect. Parnell's approach emphasizes Jerry's vulnerability and relatability in a way that resonates deeply with audiences. His vocal performance walks a delicate line, portraying Jerry's pathetic moments without making him entirely unsympathetic. There's a warmth underlying even Jerry's most humiliating failures that creates an emotional connection rather than pure schadenfreude. But the most fascinating aspect of Jerry's sleep-inducing potential comes from psychological research suggesting that witnessing someone else's social awkwardness can actually relieve our own social anxiety. When we watch Jerry fumble through uncomfortable situations, our brains process these scenarios vicariously, allowing us to experience and release social tension without personal risk. For viewers battling bedtime thought spirals about their own social missteps or inadequacies, Jerry's scenes offer a form of emotional catharsis. This phenomenon works on multiple levels. First, there's the simple comfort of comparison. No matter how bad your day was, you probably didn't accidentally betray Earth to alien overlords or get trapped in a simulation inside another simulation. Jerry's spectacular failures make our own worries seem manageable by comparison. But beyond this surface-level comparison, there's a deeper psychological mechanism at work. When we witness someone experience embarrassment and survive, our brains register a subtle but important lesson. Social failure isn't fatal. Jerry keeps getting back up, keeps trying again, and keeps finding small moments of joy despite constant setbacks. For viewers whose anxiety centers around social rejection or inadequacy, this modeling provides a form of exposure therapy. We process the emotional content of social failure through Jerry rather than through our own experiences, potentially reducing our physiological response to similar worries. The effect is particularly powerful in the pre-sleep state, when our defenses are lowering and our minds become more susceptible to emotional processing. As we wind down for the night, Jerry's struggles offer both distraction from our own concerns and a template for accepting imperfection. His perpetual state of trying and failing but continuing anyway becomes a strangely effective lullaby for the anxious mind. There's also the matter of how Jerry's scenes are constructed within the show. They often provide a rhythmic break from the high-concept sci-fi plots, creating a pacing that alternates between cosmic adventure and mundane human struggle. This variation creates a narrative cadence that's surprisingly conducive to relaxation, preventing the overstimulation that might come from constant high-stakes action. Jerry's storylines bring the show back to earth, both literally and figuratively, providing viewers with emotional grounding that can ease the transition to sleep. While Jerry's struggles ground us through relatable failure, Space Beth offers something entirely different. A character who's made peace with the ultimate existential question: does it even matter if she's the original Beth or the clone? This radical acceptance of identity uncertainty might explain why her scenes feel so unexpectedly calming during those restless nights when your own thoughts won't quiet down. Space Beth first appeared when Rick revealed he had created a clone of Beth, giving one version the chance to explore the universe while the other stayed with the family. But instead of telling them which was which, he shuffled the choices, leaving both Beths permanently uncertain about their original identity. What's remarkable is how Space Beth responds to this potentially devastating revelation, not with angst or an identity crisis, but with a shrug and a confident smile. This is where Space Beth's unique appeal for nighttime viewing emerges. In a universe where characters constantly question their place and purpose, her complete acceptance of her complicated existence creates a psychological anchor. She doesn't waste energy wondering if she's real. She simply embraces who she is now, original or not. This self-acceptance manifests in her confident posture, steady gaze, and relaxed movements, even during intense action sequences. Notice how Space Beth's scenes are often animated with a distinct visual flow. When she enters a room, there's a smoothness to her movements that contrasts sharply with the frantic energy that typically dominates the show. Her voice, performed with subtle distinction by Sarah Chalk, carries a measured confidence that signals security to viewers. Even when she's engaged in combat or high-stakes situations, there's a centeredness to her character that feels like taking a deep breath in the middle of chaos. What makes this particularly effective for pre-sleep viewing is how Space Beth's acceptance models a resolution to the very thoughts that often keep us awake at night. How many times have you laid in bed questioning your choices, wondering about roads not taken, or doubting your authentic self? Space Beth has confronted the ultimate version of this dilemma and found peace, not by solving the mystery, but by recognizing it doesn't define her worth. The relationship between Earth Beth and Space Beth evolves into something truly special as the series progresses. Initially competitors, they gradually move toward mutual respect and eventual acceptance of each other. In one particularly tender moment, they acknowledge that neither needs to be the real Beth. They can both simply be Beth. This integration of different aspects of oneself offers a powerful visual metaphor for self-compassion and acceptance that resonates deeply when we're most vulnerable to self-criticism at bedtime. Space Beth's interactions with the Smith family reveal unexpected dimensions of her character. Despite her tough exterior and adventurous lifestyle, she shows moments of genuine tenderness with Summer and Morty. When Summer expresses interest in Space Beth's lifestyle, she responds not with bravado, but with thoughtful guidance that acknowledges both the freedom and the loneliness of her choices. With Morty, she offers the validation and support he often craves from Rick, but without the accompanying ridicule. These family scenes demonstrate how Space Beth's presence shifts the family dynamic in subtle but meaningful ways. Her confidence doesn't manifest as dominance, but rather as a grounding influence that helps other characters temporarily step outside their usual patterns. Watch how Rick's typical cynicism softens slightly in her presence, how Jerry's insecurity takes different forms, and how both Summer and Morty respond to her with a more authentic version of themselves. The psychological impact of witnessing this kind of self-acceptance goes beyond mere storytelling. When we observe characters who have resolved their identity struggles, our brains actually respond by quieting similar thought patterns in ourselves. This is particularly powerful during the pre-sleep period, when our defenses naturally lower and our minds become more susceptible to influence. Space Beth's confident navigation of her complicated existence signals to our subconscious that perhaps our own identity questions can be approached with similar grace. This effect is amplified by Space Beth's body language and vocal characteristics. Her confident stance, direct eye contact, and measured speech create what psychologists might call a secure attachment figure, someone whose presence signals safety and stability. Even during action sequences, these qualities remain consistent, providing a fascinating contrast to the chaos around her. This combination of narrative self-acceptance and physical confidence creates a uniquely calming viewing experience. What's particularly remarkable about Space Beth's character is how she balances her tough exterior with genuine emotional depth. Unlike some characters who achieve calm through detachment, her peace comes from integration, accepting both her capacity for violence and her capacity for tenderness. This integrated self represents a more mature form of acceptance than simple denial or avoidance of life's complexities. Consider how this applies to your own pre-sleep thought patterns. The questions that often surface as we try to fall asleep, about our choices, our authenticity, our place in the world, mirror the existential dilemmas that Space Beth has resolved. By witnessing her acceptance, we're given a template for approaching our own uncertainties. Rather than needing definitive answers to life's biggest questions, perhaps we can find peace in acknowledging the questions themselves without letting them disturb our fundamental sense of self. The show's creators have crafted Space Beth scenes with a distinct pacing that contributes to this calming effect. Notice how the editing slows slightly, how the background music shifts to more ambient tones, and how the color palette often includes more blues and purples during her quieter moments. These production choices enhance the psychological impact of her character, creating a multi-sensory experience that signals to viewers it's safe to relax. Research suggests that characters who have achieved this kind of identity integration can actually help viewers process their own identity questions more effectively. When we witness someone who has made peace with not knowing all the answers about themselves, it gives our brains permission to release similar anxieties. This is especially valuable during the pre-sleep period, when existential questions often feel most pressing, and our ability to rationalize them away is at its weakest. In a universe where nihilism and existential dread reign supreme, Bird Person's daughter emerges as something truly extraordinary, a character of pure, untainted innocence. What's fascinating is how her brief appearances create some of the most deeply relaxing moments in the entire Rick and Morty series. There's something almost hypnotic about her presence, as if the chaotic energy that typically defines the show temporarily yields to something gentler and more contemplative when she appears on screen. The contrast between her innocence and the cynical world she inhabits should feel jarring, but instead, it creates a uniquely peaceful viewing experience. In a show where innocence is typically mocked or destroyed for comedic effect, Bird Person's daughter somehow manages to maintain her purity without becoming a target. This preservation of innocence in a universe designed to crush it becomes strangely comforting, especially during those late-night viewing sessions when your mind is searching for quiet. Her speech pattern is particularly captivating. She inherits her father's measured, deliberate cadence, but infuses it with childlike wonder and curiosity. This combination creates an almost musical quality that distinguishes her dialogue from other characters. When she speaks, the frenetic pacing of the show noticeably slows, giving viewers a moment to breathe alongside the characters. It's similar to how a parent might instinctively soften their voice when speaking to a child, and we as viewers respond to this auditory cue in much the same way. What's especially noteworthy is how her presence transforms Rick Sanchez himself. When interacting with Bird Person's daughter, Rick exhibits a tenderness that's rarely seen elsewhere in the series. Gone are the cutting remarks and defensive sarcasm. Instead, we witness genuine gentleness. These moments reveal layers to Rick's character that otherwise remain hidden beneath his typical cynicism and scientific detachment. For a show that often revels in Rick's emotional unavailability, these glimpses of authentic connection feel particularly significant. The animation style used for Bird Person's daughter reinforces her calming presence. Her scenes feature softer colors and more fluid, gentle movements that visually distinguish her from the more angular, chaotic elements that typically dominate the show's aesthetic. The animators use a subtly different technique when she's on screen: slightly smoother transitions, less aggressive line work, and a more pastel-oriented color palette. These visual cues work on a subconscious level, signaling to viewers that they've entered a different emotional space within the show. Consider the scene where she first interacts with Rick after Bird Person's resurrection. The usual frantic cutting and dynamic camera movements give way to longer, more contemplative shots. The background music shifts from the show's typical energetic synth to something more ambient and atmospheric. Everything about the scene's construction invites viewers to slow down and simply exist in the moment, rather than racing ahead to the next joke or plot development. Her half-bird nature also contributes to her calming effect. The design of her character combines human and avian elements in a way that feels harmonious rather than jarring. Unlike the many grotesque hybrid creatures that populate the Rick and Morty universe, her design has an elegant simplicity. The animators resist the urge to exaggerate her bird-like features for comic effect, instead creating a character whose visual appearance feels balanced and peaceful. There's something particularly effective about the way Bird Person's daughter impacts the show's energy. When she enters a scene, the chaotic momentum doesn't just pause, it transforms into something contemplative. Other characters speak more softly in her presence, move more deliberately, and seem more attuned to each other. This ripple effect creates moments of genuine tranquility in a show that typically operates at a frenetic pace. This transformation is particularly evident in scenes where multiple characters are present. The typical crosstalk and rapid-fire banter give way to more measured exchanges. Characters who normally talk over each other take turns speaking. The camera lingers rather than jumps. These subtle shifts create an almost meditative quality that's perfect for viewers winding down at the end of a long day. It's worth considering why the presence of a child character in adult animation might trigger such specific emotional responses in viewers. Child characters in mature content often serve as moral anchors or emotional touchstones, but Bird Person's daughter accomplishes something more subtle. Rather than explicitly commenting on the adult world around her, she simply exists within it, maintaining her innocence without judgment or commentary. This non-judgmental quality is particularly soothing for adult viewers who might feel constantly evaluated in their daily lives. The show's creators have acknowledged her unique role in the narrative, emphasizing that she represents a symbol of hope and innocence in a universe otherwise defined by chaos and despair. Unlike many characters introduced for a single episode's plot, she serves a more thematic purpose, reminding viewers and characters that innocence can survive even in the most hostile environments. This message of resilience without losing one's core goodness becomes particularly powerful in a show that often questions whether goodness has any value at all. Psychological studies suggest there's a scientific basis for why characters like Bird Person's daughter are so effective at helping viewers relax. Representations of innocence and vulnerability can trigger protective instincts that actually lower stress levels, heart rate, and blood pressure. When we encounter innocence that isn't immediately threatened or corrupted, it activates neural pathways associated with caregiving and protection rather than vigilance or defense. This physiological response creates ideal conditions for transitioning to sleep. This protective response is heightened when the innocent character is situated within an otherwise threatening or chaotic environment. The contrast between Bird Person's daughter's peaceful nature and the danger-filled universe she inhabits makes her innocence feel more precious and worth protecting. Our brains respond to this perceived need for protection by down-regulating stress responses and increasing feelings of tenderness and care, exactly the emotional state conducive to drifting off to sleep. Unlike characters who are saccharine or artificially sweet, Bird Person's daughter achieves this effect without feeling manufactured or manipulative. Her innocence feels authentic within the context of her character, which allows viewers to respond genuinely, rather than with the skepticism that more obviously constructed cute characters might trigger. This authenticity is crucial for viewers of Rick and Morty, a show that has trained its audience to be suspicious of emotional manipulation. When the chaos of the universe becomes too much, there's something uniquely soothing about witnessing a connection so profound it spans across an entire civilization. Unity represents a paradox in Rick and Morty, a hive-mind entity capable of connecting with Rick in ways no single consciousness ever could, creating scenes that are simultaneously heartbreaking and strangely calming to watch before drifting off to sleep. Unity stands apart from other characters in Rick's life. While most relationships in the show are defined by conflict or manipulation, Unity and Rick share something deeper, a connection that reveals his rarely seen vulnerability. Christina Hendricks' voice work brings a distinct, soothing quality to Unity that enhances the emotional weight of their interactions. The character's ability to speak through multiple bodies while maintaining one consciousness creates a harmonious vocal blend that feels almost hypnotic to listen to, especially during their more intimate exchanges. What makes Unity particularly fascinating is how the character serves as a mirror to Rick's complexities. During their relationship, we witness Rick at his most exposed, not just physically, as he engages in various adventures with Unity's controlled population, but emotionally as he drops his cynical shield. There's a remarkable authenticity to these moments that cuts through the show's typical ironic distance, creating scenes where even the background noise seems to soften and slow down to match their emotional intimacy. The pacing of Unity's episodes provides a noticeable shift from the show's usual frenetic energy. When Rick and Unity share quiet conversations, the animation often lingers on still moments rather than jumping between rapid-fire jokes. This visual calm, combined with their meaningful dialogue, creates pockets of tranquility that feel especially conducive to pre-sleep viewing. These scenes allow viewers to exhale and process emotions alongside the characters, rather than being bombarded with constant stimulation. Perhaps the most powerful element of Unity's character is found in their final letter to Rick. This farewell note stands as one of the most mature depictions of love and boundaries in the entire series. In it, Unity expresses a profound understanding of Rick, saying, "I see you for who you are, and I accept you." This statement encapsulates the theme of radical acceptance that defines their relationship. Unity can literally see all aspects of Rick simultaneously and still choose to care for him despite his flaws. This acceptance goes beyond simple affection. Unity recognizes both Rick's brilliant mind and his toxic behaviors, understanding how they're inextricably linked. Yet instead of trying to change him or enabling his worst impulses, Unity makes the difficult choice to establish boundaries. This portrayal of love as clear-eyed rather than blindly idealistic creates a surprisingly nuanced emotional resonance rarely found in animated comedy. The show's creators have specifically noted that the relationship between Rick and Unity serves as a reflection of Rick's struggles with intimacy and connection. Their dynamic illustrates the tension between his genius and his self-destructive tendencies in ways that other character relationships can't capture. Unity isn't intimidated by Rick's intellect, nor put off by his worst qualities, making their connection uniquely meaningful in his emotional journey. What's particularly interesting about Unity's scenes is how they blend heartbreak with comfort. The episode concludes with Rick attempting suicide after being rejected by Unity, a devastating moment that nonetheless contains a strange solace in its honesty. There's something oddly soothing about watching a character typically defined by emotional avoidance finally confront genuine feelings, even painful ones. The raw authenticity creates a different kind of comfort than more conventionally peaceful scenes. This might explain why many viewers find Unity's episodes particularly suitable for bedtime viewing, despite their emotional intensity. Psychological studies suggest that emotional catharsis through fictional characters can help viewers process their own emotional tensions before sleep. By engaging with characters like Unity who embody complex emotions, viewers can reflect on their own experiences from a safe distance, facilitating relaxation and emotional release. The soothing effect of Unity's scenes comes partly from their striking contrast with the show's usual tone. In a series that often celebrates cynicism and mockery, witnessing moments of sincere connection feels like discovering an oasis in a desert. The rare vulnerability on display creates a safe space for viewers to lower their own defenses, a psychological state particularly conducive to transitioning into sleep. Unity's distinctive vocal quality contributes significantly to this effect. Hendrix delivers Unity's lines with a warmth and depth that feels grounding even during intense emotional moments. The character's use of multiple voices blending into a harmonious whole creates a calming audio effect similar to certain meditation techniques that employ overlapping vocal patterns to induce relaxation. What makes Unity's departure letter so powerful is how it acknowledges the beauty of their connection while recognizing its unsustainability. This bittersweet recognition mirrors many real human experiences of love and loss, giving viewers permission to find peace in accepting life's imperfections rather than fighting against them. There's something deeply comforting about watching a character model acceptance of painful truths. It suggests our own difficult emotions need not be conquered but simply acknowledged. For viewers struggling with racing thoughts before sleep, Unity's episodes offer a unique form of comfort through contrast. The hive mind character, who can literally do everything simultaneously, still chooses to slow down and be present with Rick in their intimate moments. This visualization of focused attention amidst potential chaos provides a template for calming one's own scattered thoughts at bedtime. Even the visual representation of Unity, multiple bodies moving with synchronized purpose, creates a soothing rhythmic quality. The animation during Unity's scenes often features flowing movements and harmonious color palettes that distinguish these moments from the show's typically chaotic visual style. These subtle artistic choices enhance the calming effect for viewers sensitive to visual stimulation before sleep. The ultimate lesson of Unity's character, that connection requires honesty and boundaries, provides a surprisingly mature framework for emotional processing. Their departure isn't portrayed as a failure, but as a necessary act of self-preservation and love. This nuanced approach to relationship dynamics offers viewers a template for healthy emotional regulation that can ease anxiety around their own relationships before sleep. After exploring Unity's mature approach to boundaries, let's turn to a character who represents the opposite end of the emotional spectrum. In a show overflowing with complex personalities and conflicted relationships, how did Noob Noob, essentially just a janitor with a catchphrase, manage to capture the hearts of millions and create such a disproportionate feeling of comfort? Sometimes the simplest character in a complex narrative offers the most profound comfort. Noob Noob appears in just one episode as the janitor for the Vindicators, yet his impact on fans has been surprisingly significant. Unlike most characters in Rick and Morty who struggle with existential dread or complex emotional baggage, Noob Noob represents something refreshingly uncomplicated: pure, enthusiastic appreciation. What makes Noob Noob so memorable despite his extremely limited screen time? When we first meet him, he's simply cleaning up after the Vindicators, seemingly insignificant to the plot. But there's something immediately endearing about his presence. While other characters in the show navigate intricate emotional landscapes and moral dilemmas, Noob Noob offers viewers a break from complexity. His entire character can be summed up in his appreciation for Rick's inappropriate humor and his willingness to acknowledge brilliance without qualification. The delivery of Noob Noob's catchphrase deserves special attention. When he responds to Rick's jokes with his distinctive "wubba lubba dub dub," there's a musical quality to it, a rhythmic pattern that creates an almost hypnotic effect. This vocal signature becomes a sort of audio anchor in the episode, providing a predictable beat that viewers find oddly satisfying. The catchphrase itself isn't particularly profound, but its delivery creates a soothing pattern that stands out against the show's typically chaotic soundscape. What truly cements Noob Noob's place in fans' hearts is his relationship with Rick. Throughout the series, nearly every character has a complicated relationship with the show's protagonist. Family members love him despite his abuse, friends tolerate him despite his selfishness, and enemies respect him despite his antagonism. But Noob Noob's appreciation of Rick lacks any of these qualifiers or complications. It's pure and unconditional. In a universe where everyone has mixed feelings about Rick Sanchez, Noob Noob simply thinks he's awesome. This dynamic reaches its pivotal moment when Rick, drunk and emotional, reveals that Noob Noob was the only vindicator he actually cared about. This revelation is powerful not just because it's unexpected, but because it shows that even Rick, with all his cynicism and emotional walls, recognizes and values simple, honest appreciation. When Rick says, "This guy gets it," he's acknowledging something rare in his universe, someone who sees him without judgment. There's something deeply comforting about this interaction for viewers. It suggests that sometimes the most meaningful connections aren't the most complex ones, but rather the ones where we feel truly seen and appreciated without conditions. This resonates with our own desire to be valued for who we are, without having to navigate the complicated social dynamics that often accompany relationships. Noob Noob's position as the overlooked janitor adds another layer to his comforting presence. Despite being constantly overshadowed by the supposedly heroic vindicators, he maintains his enthusiasm and continues showing up with a positive attitude. There's an unexpected wisdom in this approach to life, finding joy in being present and making contributions, even when they go unrecognized. For viewers wrestling with feelings of insignificance or underappreciation, Noob Noob models a kind of contentment that doesn't depend on external validation or recognition. This aspect of his character is particularly soothing right before sleep, when many people naturally reflect on their place in the world and their contributions. Watching someone find meaning in seemingly small roles can help viewers reframe their own perceived limitations in a more positive light, easing anxiety about status or achievement. From a psychological perspective, Noob Noob's character creates what therapists call unconditional positive regard, a stance of complete acceptance without judgment. When we encounter characters who embody this quality, they create a sense of psychological safety that allows us to lower our own defenses. The show's creators likely didn't anticipate how strongly this aspect of his character would resonate with the audience, but it explains why such a minor character has developed such a devoted following. What's most fascinating about Noob Noob's popularity is how it contradicts conventional wisdom about character development. He doesn't have a complex backstory, moral ambiguity, or a transformative arc. Instead, his appeal lies in his consistency and simplicity, qualities that provide a welcome counterbalance to the show's typically chaotic energy. In a narrative full of unpredictable twists and existential crises, Noob Noob represents an island of straightforward positivity. The animation style used for Noob Noob supports this effect. His movements are predictable, his expressions sincere. There's no hidden agenda or subtext to decode. This visual simplicity, combined with his straightforward dialogue, creates a character who requires very little cognitive effort to process. Perfect for the pre-sleep state when our brains are naturally winding down and seeking simplicity. Interestingly, the show's creators have noted Noob Noob's unexpected popularity, acknowledging that sometimes the most straightforward characters create the deepest connections with viewers. His straightforward nature and positive demeanor provide a necessary balance in a show that often leans heavily into complexity and darkness. Without characters like Noob Noob, the show would lose some of its emotional range and, paradoxically, some of its depth. For viewers watching Rick and Morty before bed, Noob Noob's scenes provide a perfect emotional note to end on. His uncomplicated goodness and appreciation create a psychological environment where it feels safe to relax and transition toward sleep. There's no emotional puzzle to solve or moral quandary to consider, just the simple comfort of witnessing appreciation in its purest form. In a universe where even the most absurd becomes routine, Dr. Wong stands as an island of psychological stability. The contrast between her office's grounded reality and the show's interdimensional chaos creates an almost hypnotic effect for viewers searching for calm before sleep. When Susan Sarandon's measured voice cuts through Rick's defenses, we're not just watching therapy, we're experiencing a form of it ourselves. Dr. Wong represents something extraordinary in Rick and Morty, a character who refuses to be pulled into the gravitational field of Rick's ego. While most characters either worship or despise Rick, Dr. Wong simply observes him with professional detachment. In their sessions, she maintains perfect composure, even as Rick attempts to intimidate her with outbursts and insults. This creates a fascinating dynamic where, for once, Rick's chaos meets an immovable force of calm rationality. What makes Dr. Wong's scenes particularly soothing is her masterful use of silence. Unlike most characters who rush to fill conversational gaps, Dr. Wong strategically employs pauses that create space for emotional processing. These moments of quiet are rare in Rick and Morty's typically frantic pacing, offering viewers a chance to breathe alongside the characters. Her unhurried speech pattern has an almost meditative quality. Words delivered with purpose rather than haste, each one carrying the weight of professional consideration. The therapeutic atmosphere extends beyond just her vocal qualities. When the Smith family enters Dr. Wong's office, the animation itself transforms. The camera movements become more deliberate, with fewer cuts and more static shots that linger on emotional reactions. This visual steadiness mirrors the psychological containment that therapy provides, a safe, predictable space where chaotic emotions can be examined without judgment. One particularly powerful moment comes when Dr. Wong confronts Rick about his self-destructive patterns. She tells him, "You're a walking target for a never-ending sea of angry nerds that think getting in a fight with me is some kind of platform." This insight cuts through Rick's defensive layer, highlighting how he creates conflicts to avoid vulnerability. For viewers who struggle with similar patterns, hearing these observations articulated so clearly can spark genuine self-reflection, even while half asleep. What's fascinating about Dr. Wong is that she doesn't just offer insights to the characters. She provides them directly to the audience. When she challenges the Smith family's avoidance patterns or points out their unhealthy dynamics, viewers often recognize these same patterns in their own lives. It's like getting therapy by proxy, allowing us to process our own issues through the safe distance of fiction. The calming effect of Dr. Wong's sessions is enhanced by her complete lack of judgment. In a show where characters constantly criticize and belittle each other, her unconditional acceptance creates a psychological environment where it feels safe to be vulnerable. She never shames Rick for his alcoholism or Beth for her abandonment issues. She simply observes these behaviors and gently guides them toward understanding their origins. This non-judgmental approach extends to viewers as well. When we watch Dr. Wong help the Smith family confront uncomfortable truths, we're invited to examine our own emotional patterns without the harsh inner critic that often keeps us awake at night. Her sessions model a form of self-compassion that's particularly valuable in those vulnerable pre-sleep moments when we're most prone to rumination. The show's creators clearly understood the therapeutic power of these scenes. They deliberately included Dr. Wong as a character who could explore deeper emotional themes within the series' otherwise cynical framework. Her office becomes a narrative device allowing for emotional catharsis and self-acceptance, not just for the characters, but for viewers who might be using the show as a sleep aid. Even the topics addressed in Dr. Wong's sessions feel purposefully designed to address common pre-sleep anxieties. She helps the characters navigate family conflicts, identity issues, and existential questions, the very same thoughts that often keep viewers staring at the ceiling. By witnessing these therapeutic processes played out on screen, we're given templates for how to approach our own emotional material. The comfort derived from Dr. Wong's scenes has scientific backing. Psychological studies suggest that witnessing therapy, even in fictional contexts, can help viewers process their own emotional material more effectively. When we watch characters achieve breakthroughs under Dr. Wong's guidance, our brains actually prepare to do similar emotional processing during sleep. It's as if her sessions prime our minds for the unconscious therapeutic work that happens naturally during REM cycles. What's particularly effective about Dr. Wong's approach is how she balances validation with challenge. She acknowledges the Smith family's feelings while gently pushing them toward greater self-awareness. This balanced approach creates emotional safety without enabling harmful patterns. exactly the kind of mental environment that facilitates healthy sleep. The detailed animation during these therapy scenes enhances their soothing quality. Dr. Wong's office is notably free of the visual chaos that characterizes most Rick and Morty settings. The color palette shifts to warmer, more muted tones. Background details remain consistent rather than constantly changing. This visual stability further signals to viewers' brains that it's safe to relax and process emotions. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Dr. Wong's character is that she maintains her therapeutic presence despite being aware of the multiverse's chaos. Unlike most straight man characters who eventually break when confronted with Rick's reality, Dr. Wong accepts the existence of pickle-shaped scientists and interdimensional travel without losing her professional focus. This demonstrates that emotional stability isn't about denying chaos. It's about maintaining perspective within it. For viewers using Rick and Morty as a sleep aid, Dr. Wong's scenes offer a perfect psychological transition. They provide enough emotional engagement to distract from personal anxieties while modeling the very mental state that promotes sleep. Calm acceptance of complex realities. The therapeutic rhythms of her sessions, opening with tension, exploring deeper issues, and resolving with new insights, mirror the natural unwinding process our minds need before sleep. The therapeutic calm of Dr. Wong's office eventually gives way to something even more powerful. Those rare moments when Rick and Morty find themselves alone, their usual chaos temporarily suspended. Behind all the interdimensional adventures and scientific madness, there exists a grandfather-grandson relationship that occasionally transcends the cynicism to reveal something genuinely moving. These quiet interludes aren't just emotional core dumps for the characters. They're psychological anchors for viewers drifting towards sleep. When Rick and Morty sit together in silence, watching stars from the hood of their spaceship or reflecting on their experiences after narrowly escaping death, something shifts in the show's emotional temperature. In The Wedding Squanchers, their conversation about fears and regrets reveals vulnerabilities neither character typically acknowledges. These moments feel almost sacred in their authenticity, islands of genuine connection in a sea of chaos that somehow make the perfect transition into sleep. The contrast between these quiet scenes and the show's typical frenetic energy creates a powerful emotional resonance. Rick's cynicism and Morty's naivety should, by all logic, generate perpetual conflict. Their worldviews fundamentally clash, one shaped by centuries of cosmic disillusionment, the other still forming through traumatic adventures and teenage awkwardness. Yet in these tender moments, their differences dissolve into something approaching mutual understanding. Perhaps the most iconic of these quiet moments occurs in Rick Potion number 9. 9. When Rick and Morty bury their own alternate selves and silently take their places in a new reality. As Mazzy Star's Hauntingly Beautiful Fade Into You plays, we witness something profound. Rick's rare moment of reflection on the consequences of his actions and the emotional burden he's placed on Morty. The music transforms the scene completely, creating a melancholic atmosphere that lingers long after the episode ends. The musical choices in these moments deserve special attention. While the show typically employs energetic, synthesizer-heavy scores to match its frenetic pace, these quiet scenes shift dramatically to ambient, atmospheric compositions that encourage contemplation. The slower tempo and minimalist arrangements create an audio environment that naturally slows your breathing and heart rate, precisely the physiological changes needed to transition into sleep. What makes these scenes particularly powerful is how rarely Rick drops his defensive shield of sarcasm and nihilism. When he does, the emotional impact is magnified. In The Ricklantis Mix-Up, Morty's vulnerable admission, "I don't want to be like you, Rick," cuts through the usual dynamic to reveal the emotional stakes in their relationship. These aren't just grandfather-grandson adventures. They're a complex dance of identity and influence that occasionally achieves moments of profound honesty. The animation style in these scenes subtly shifts as well. The typically rapid cuts and dynamic camera movements give way to longer, more contemplative shots. Characters are often framed in stillness, sometimes in silhouette or partial darkness, creating visual compositions that feel more like paintings than cartoon frames. This visual quieting complements the emotional and musical shifts, creating a multisensory experience of deceleration. Over the seasons, these quiet moments have evolved alongside the characters. Early in the series, their rare connections often centered around Rick reluctantly showing concern for Morty's well-being, or Morty processing the trauma of their adventures. As both characters have grown, their moments of connection have matured into something more complex, mutual recognition of their flawed but genuine bond. In The Old Man in the Seat, Rick's reflection on loneliness and his connection to Morty reveals how far their relationship has developed. These scenes have become less about one-sided revelations and more about mutual acknowledgement of their interdependence, however reluctant Rick might be to admit it. The show's creators have acknowledged the importance of these quieter scenes, with Dan Harmon noting that they provide essential character development amidst the sci-fi chaos. These moments aren't just emotional palate cleansers. They're fundamental to understanding why we care about these characters beyond their comedic adventures. What makes these scenes particularly effective for pre-sleep viewing lies in the psychological concept of narrative resolution. When characters who typically exist in states of conflict achieve moments of genuine connection, it creates a sense of emotional safety that mirrors what our brains need before transitioning to sleep. The resolution of interpersonal tension signals to our primitive brain that it's safe to lower our defenses, a crucial precondition for sleep. Research suggests that when characters resolve their conflicts and share genuine emotions, it can trigger a sense of safety and calm in the audience. This parasympathetic response, the body's rest and digest mode, becomes particularly powerful when it follows the sympathetic activation, fight or flight, that characterizes most of Rick and Morty's adventures. The contrast creates a physiological deceleration that perfectly mirrors the body's natural transition to sleep. These quiet moments also provide viewers with emotional processing through vicarious experience. Watching Rick and Morty navigate their complicated relationship gives us permission to acknowledge our own complex feelings about family connections without directly confronting potentially activating personal memories. Ideal for the vulnerable pre-sleep state when defenses naturally lower. For those who struggle with racing thoughts before sleep, these scenes offer a template for emotional resolution. The characters model a kind of acceptance, not of every problem being solved, but of connection existing despite unresolved complexities. This acceptance mirrors the mental state most conducive to sleep. Not the absence of problems, but the ability to set them aside temporarily. The rarity of these moments makes them particularly potent. If every Rick and Morty scene featured emotional vulnerability, the impact would diminish significantly. It's precisely because they appear as unexpected gifts amid cynicism and chaos that they create such powerful emotional anchors. Their scarcity makes them precious, causing viewers to pay closer attention and absorb their emotional resonance more deeply. These quiet moments between Rick and Morty remind us that beneath the show's scientific gadgetry and interdimensional adventures lies something fundamentally human: the need for connection despite our flaws and differences. When Rick and Morty occasionally achieve this connection, they model a kind of emotional honesty that tells our brains it's safe to let go and transition into the vulnerability of sleep. Beyond the grandfather-grandson dynamic that anchors the show, Beth Smith's character offers something profoundly soothing that makes her scenes perfect for pre-sleep viewing. While her relationship with Rick forms the emotional backbone of the series, it's actually Beth's moments of motherly nurturing that create some of the most calming sequences in Rick and Morty. Beth's character journey is fascinating because she shouldn't be a source of calm at all. Her childhood abandonment by Rick and her resulting desire for validation created a foundation of anxiety and insecurity that ripples through her adult relationships. Yet in those rare moments when Beth steps into her role as a mother with full presence, something transformative happens on screen, and in our minds as viewers. The episode A Rick Convenient Mort showcases one of these powerful moments when Beth comforts Morty after a painful breakup. What makes this scene so effective for pre-sleep viewing isn't just the content, but the delivery. Sarah Chalke's voice performance during these emotionally charged scenes is notably different from Beth's usual cadence. Her voice takes on a softness and warmth that's almost hypnotic, creating an audio environment that signals safety to our nervous systems. These nurturing scenes stand in stark contrast to Beth's typical characterization. For most of the series, Beth is portrayed as someone struggling with her own demons, her abandonment issues, her questioning whether she should have pursued her dreams instead of starting a family, and her complicated relationship with alcohol. But when she steps into these moments of pure maternal comfort, we see glimpses of her highest self emerging from beneath those struggles. What's particularly interesting about Beth's evolution is how she gradually shifts from seeking her father's approval to establishing her own identity. Early in the series, almost every decision Beth makes is filtered through the lens of, "What would Rick think?" But as the show progresses, we watch her journey towards self-acceptance and autonomy. This growth isn't just compelling storytelling. It models a kind of emotional maturation that resonates with viewers who might be wrestling with similar questions as they try to quiet their minds before sleep. The addition of Space Beth to the narrative creates another fascinating dimension to Beth's character. Their relationship begins as competitive, but evolves into something much more profound, a recognition that they are both valid expressions of Beth's identity. This integration of different aspects of self, the adventurous, independent Space Beth and the family-oriented Earth Beth, represents a psychological wholeness that's deeply satisfying to witness. When Beth expresses unconditional love toward her children, particularly Morty, she creates moments of emotional safety that stand out in a show often characterized by chaos and cynicism. These scenes are animated with distinctive care. The pacing slows, the color palette warms, and the composition of shots becomes more intimate. The technical aspects of these scenes work in concert with the emotional content to create a viewing experience that naturally slows breathing and heart rate. The show's creators have commented that Beth's nurturing moments serve an important function in the overall emotional architecture of Rick and Morty. In a universe that can often feel cold, random, and meaningless, Beth's moments of genuine connection provide counterbalance, reminding viewers that even in the most chaotic multiverse, the simple act of a parent comforting a child remains meaningful. What makes Beth's comforting scenes especially effective for pre-sleep viewing relates to some fascinating neuroscience. Psychological studies suggest that witnessing parental comfort activates neural pathways associated with receiving comfort ourselves. When we watch Beth soothe Morty after his heartbreak, our brains don't just process this as an interesting scene in a TV show. Parts of our brain actually respond as if we're receiving that comfort directly. This neurological response is particularly powerful because it taps into some of our earliest and most fundamental emotional programming. Long before we developed language or rational thought, our infant brains were wired to respond to parental soothing. Beth's scenes trigger those deep, primitive pathways that signal safety and security to our nervous systems, the exact state we need to transition into sleep. The evolution of Beth from a somewhat self-centered character to one who can provide genuine emotional support shows remarkable writing and character development. This growth gives viewers a sense of possibility and hope. If Beth can integrate her complicated feelings about parenthood and identity to become a more nurturing presence, perhaps we can resolve our own internal conflicts as well. What's especially notable about these scenes is their authenticity. Beth's comfort isn't saccharine or performative. It acknowledges the real pain her children experience while offering genuine connection rather than toxic positivity. This honest approach to emotional support creates a template for the kind of self-compassion that can help quiet an anxious mind before sleep. As viewers, we're drawn to these quieter moments with Beth because they offer a type of emotional resolution that's often missing in our own lives. The combination of Chalk's soothing vocal performance, the deliberate pacing of these scenes, and the authentic emotional exchange creates a perfect environment for our pre-sleep minds to process our own feelings and begin the transition to rest. Beth's journey towards self-acceptance mirrors our own pre-sleep psychological needs. Just as Beth learns to integrate different aspects of herself, her desire for adventure, and her commitment to family, her anger at her father and her love for him, we too need to reconcile our contradictions before we can truly rest. Watching her achieve this integration gives us a template for our own emotional processing. While Rick and Morty is justifiably famous for its sci-fi concepts and dark humor, these maternal moments with Beth reveal the show's emotional intelligence. By including these scenes of genuine comfort, The creators acknowledge that even the most cynical viewers need moments of authentic human connection. The contrast between the show's typical chaotic energy and these islands of maternal calm makes these scenes all the more powerful and memorable. Have you ever noticed how the Smith family's everyday dysfunction somehow becomes strangely comforting when you're trying to fall asleep? There's something about their chaotic household that feels like the perfect backdrop for drifting off into dreamland. It shouldn't make sense. These characters constantly scream at each other, face interdimensional threats, and barely maintain their sanity. Yet somehow, the Smith family creates an oddly calming atmosphere that works surprisingly well when you're trying to quiet your mind. The Smith family resonates with us because they represent our own imperfect families, just with the volume turned up to 11. Jerry's desperate need for approval, Beth's struggle with life choices, Summer's teenage angst, and Morty's anxiety. These are all exaggerated versions of the dynamics we recognize from our own lives. This familiarity creates a subtle comfort zone that helps us relax, even as the family navigates the multiverse with a genius alcoholic grandpa. We typically think of sleep aids as gentle sounds, soft voices, or calming music, not the bickering of cartoon family members dealing with alien parasites or Cronenberg dimensions. Yet there's something about these familiar family dynamics that works on a subconscious level. Our brains recognize the patterns of family interaction, making even the most sci-fi scenarios feel grounded enough to let our guard down. Throughout the series, no matter how bizarre the adventure or how far they travel through different dimensions, we always return to the Smith household. This consistent return creates a sense of stability, even when stability is the last word you'd use to describe this family. The living room, the kitchen table, the garage lab, these spaces become familiar touchpoints that anchor us through the cosmic chaos, making them oddly effective settings for pre-sleep viewing. Neuroscience gives us some insight into why familiar fictional characters can help us relax. When we regularly watch characters we know well, our brains process them similar to how we process actual acquaintances. The voices of characters we've spent hours with trigger reward pathways in our brains that release small amounts of oxytocin and dopamine, the same chemicals involved in bonding with real people. Even when those characters are as dysfunctional as the Smiths, this familiarity response helps prepare our bodies for rest. Each Smith family member embodies archetypes we recognize from real life, sometimes painfully so. Summer represents the overachieving daughter trying to find her place while maintaining her social status. Jerry embodies the underachieving father whose insecurities drive much of his behavior. Beth shows us the conflicted mother balancing career frustrations with family responsibilities. And Morty, perpetually anxious and overwhelmed, gives voice to the part of us that's just trying to survive each day's new challenges. What makes these characters particularly effective for sleep is how they move us through different emotional states. There's comfort in their predictable reactions. Jerry will always find a way to embarrass himself. Beth will maintain her composure until she doesn't. Summer will oscillate between teen rebellion and surprising wisdom, and Morty will reluctantly follow Rick into danger while growing a bit more resilient each time. These patterns become almost meditative when you're familiar with the show. Each family member brings something unique to our sleep journey. Jerry's constant fumbling provides reassurance that our own minor failures aren't so catastrophic. Beth's composure in the face of absurdity teaches us to maintain equilibrium. Summer shows us that finding your identity is an ongoing process at any age. Morty demonstrates how to face overwhelming circumstances with a mixture of complaint and courage. And Rick, though not technically a Smith, provides the chaotic energy that somehow makes the family's normal problems seem manageable by comparison. There's a particular episode where the family attends therapy with Dr. Wong, and they're forced to confront their dysfunctional patterns through the metaphor of a train set. This session reveals how each member contributes to their collective issues, but also how they function as a unit despite their problems. Watching moments like these helps us process our own family dynamics from a safe distance, making it easier to let go of our real-world tensions as we drift toward sleep. The most soothing Smith family moments often come when the sci-fi elements fade into the background, and we simply watch them interact as a family. Jerry and Beth reconciling after another near divorce. Summer and Morty bonding over their shared trauma of being Rick's grandchildren. These quieter scenes provide a gentle emotional release that's perfect for transitioning from the stress of our day to the relaxation needed for sleep. What's particularly effective about using the Smith family as sleep companions is the balance they strike between chaos and familiarity. The situations they face are extraordinary, but their reactions remain consistently human. This combination gives our brains just enough engagement to stop ruminating on our own problems without being so stimulating that it keeps us awake. Their gentle chaos becomes white noise for our overthinking minds. We also see moments when the Smiths display surprising emotional depth, like when Beth questions whether she's a clone, or when Jerry shows unexpected courage despite his usual cowardice. These glimpses of character growth remind us that even the most set-in-their-ways people can evolve, offering a subliminal message of hope that can ease anxiety as we prepare for sleep. The Smith family kitchen table has been the setting for countless confrontations, confessions, and occasional connections. It's a space where interdimensional adventures are discussed with the same casual tone as school problems or work complaints. This blending of the extraordinary with the mundane helps normalize our own daily stresses, making them seem less significant as we try to quiet our minds. Rick and Morty's sound design also contributes to the show's effectiveness as a sleep aid. The Smith family's voices maintain consistent patterns. Jerry's nervous higher pitch, Beth's controlled tone, Summer's teenage inflections, and Morty's anxious wavering. Once familiar, these vocal patterns become audio touchstones that signal to our brains that we're in known territory, helping to ease the transition to sleep. Of all the voice patterns that might lull you to sleep, Jerry Smith's characteristic nervous pitch could actually be your brain's secret off switch. While the show portrays him as hopelessly out of touch with Rick's genius-level science, Jerry's perpetual cluelessness might be exactly what your overtired, overthinking mind needs to finally power down for the night. Jerry represents something we all recognize in ourselves, that feeling of being completely lost in a complex world. But there's something surprisingly comforting about this when you're staring at your ceiling at 2 a.m., wrestling with tomorrow's problems. His character gives us permission to admit when we're confused, which mirrors exactly what our brains need to transition from active thinking to peaceful rest. When the multiverse gets impossibly complex, Jerry stays refreshingly simple. While Rick's dialogue often involves rapid-fire scientific jargon and multi-dimensional chess moves, Jerry's straightforward reactions provide a mental break. His confusion when faced with alien technology or interdimensional concepts mirrors our own. But instead of stressing about it, he simply accepts his limitations. That acceptance creates an audio environment where complexity isn't welcome, precisely the mindset we need to drift off. The predictability of Jerry's character offers another sleep-inducing benefit. We know exactly how he'll react in most situations, with earnest attempts to connect with his family that often miss the mark, but reveal his genuine desire for approval. This predictability creates a comfortable pattern for our brains to settle into. When Jerry launches into one of his advertising pitches or expresses enthusiasm for simple pleasures like watching Midnight Run for the 100th time, our brains recognize the pattern and can relax into it. There's actual science behind why Jerry's simplicity might help you fall asleep. Research suggests that characters who embody straightforward thinking can help our brains downshift from the complex thought patterns that typically keep us awake. It's like Jerry gives your brain permission to stop trying so hard, to let go of the mental gymnastics and just exist in a simpler state. His character becomes a cognitive template that helps transition your mind from wakefulness to sleep. Beyond his straightforward nature, Jerry's emotional intelligence occasionally shines through in surprising ways. Remember when he comforted Beth after the Space Beth revelation? In that moment, Jerry revealed a depth that contrasts with his usual portrayal as the family's designated failure. These glimpses of emotional resonance create a human connection that can be deeply calming as we prepare for sleep. When Jerry steps up in these rare moments, he reminds us that sometimes the simplest approach to emotional problems is also the most effective. Jerry's voice itself contributes to his effectiveness as a sleep aid. Unlike Rick's often volatile vocal patterns or Morty's anxiety-inducing pitch changes, Jerry maintains a consistent, non-threatening tone throughout most episodes. His voice rarely becomes too jarring or dramatic, making it perfect background noise for sleep. Even when he's panicking, which is often, there's a familiar quality to his distress that becomes oddly comforting once you're used to it. The predictability of his vocal patterns signals to our brains that no real threats are present. What's particularly interesting about Jerry is that his best moments nearly always come when he stops trying to impress others. When he simply embraces who he is, whether that's his love of camping or his pride in his coin collection, he finds a contentment that's actually quite enviable. This mindset perfectly mirrors what we need to fall asleep. The ability to let go of our social masks and performance pressures, to stop trying to impress anyone, even ourselves. Jerry inadvertently models the mental state most conducive to drifting off. Consider how Jerry's approach to life stands in stark contrast to Rick's. Where Rick overthinks everything, analyzing the multiverse with his genius intellect, Jerry accepts the world at face value. When Rick sees infinite possibility, Jerry sees what's directly in front of him. This simplicity creates a cognitive shortcut that's remarkably effective for sleep. It's permission to stop running mental simulations of tomorrow's problems or yesterday's embarrassments. Jerry doesn't do that, and for about 8 hours each night, neither should we. Even Jerry's failures and missteps contribute to his soothing presence. There's something deeply relatable about watching someone make mistakes, get back up, and keep trying, especially when we're lying awake cataloging our own shortcomings. Jerry doesn't let his failures define him, at least not completely, and there's a strange comfort in that persistence. His resilience becomes a subconscious reminder that whatever's keeping us awake probably isn't as catastrophic as it seems in the dark. The way Jerry navigates his marriage with Beth offers another layer of sleep-inducing comfort. Despite their obvious problems, we see genuine moments of connection, like when Jerry stands by Beth through difficult revelations, or when they briefly reconnect over shared concerns about their children. These realistic relationship dynamics remind us that perfection isn't necessary for contentment, a thought that can help quiet the relationship anxieties that often surface just as we're trying to fall asleep. There's also something to be said for Jerry's authentic enthusiasm for things others find mundane. His genuine excitement about his R2-D2 coin collection or his pride in mastering simple tasks shows a contentment with ordinary pleasures that most of us could benefit from. This appreciation for life's simple aspects creates a gentle cognitive environment where achievement and status fade in importance, exactly the mental shift needed for sleep to take over. Unlike Jerry's constant transparency, Beth Smith keeps her emotional world locked behind steel doors. But what happens in those fleeting moments when those doors crack open might be the most effective sleep trigger in the entire series. Her scene comforting Morty after his heartbreak with Planetina isn't just good storytelling. It might be the exact emotional release your brain needs to finally power down for the night. What makes Beth such a fascinating character for relaxation is the genuine rarity of her vulnerable moments. We're accustomed to seeing her maintain precise control, wielding surgical tools with the same cool precision she uses to manage her family's chaos. This consistent emotional restraint makes those occasional glimpses of her true feelings incredibly powerful. It's like witnessing a solar eclipse, rare, fleeting, and somehow touching something primal within us. The episode, A Rick Convenient Mort, showcases one of these perfect moments when Beth discovers Morty devastated after his breakup with Planetina. We see a complete transformation in her demeanor as maternal instinct temporarily overrides her usual walls. Her posture softens, her voice gentles, and for a brief time, we witness the mother she always had the capacity to be beneath her hardened exterior. This scene works exceptionally well for sleep induction because it follows the exact emotional pattern our brains need to transition to rest, the release of tension we've been unconsciously holding. What's particularly effective about Beth's character is how her vulnerable moments contrast with her typical presentation. Most of the time, we see her battling the frustrations of unrealized potential, trapped between her domestic life and dreams of what might have been. This inner conflict makes her relatable to anyone lying awake at night, wondering about their own life choices. When she briefly drops this struggle and simply connects with her son, the relief is palpable, not just for her character, but for us as viewers. Research into sleep psychology suggests something fascinating about these scenes. Witnessing emotional catharsis in fictional characters actually helps us process our own suppressed feelings. It's a form of emotional release by proxy. When Beth finally expresses warmth or vulnerability, our brains experience a similar release of tension, creating ideal conditions for sleep to take over. We don't have to do the emotional heavy lifting ourselves. Beth's journey does it for us. The complexity of Beth's relationship with her father Rick adds another dimension to her character that works surprisingly well for sleep meditation. Their interactions often reveal the origins of her defensive nature. We see glimpses of a child who learned to shield herself from disappointment when her brilliant but unreliable father abandoned the family. These revelations help us understand the layers beneath her controlled exterior, which makes her rare moments of connection even more powerful. What's interesting about these father-daughter scenes is how they create a particular kind of emotional resonance. When Beth occasionally breaks through Rick's nihilistic shell, or when he shows genuine care for her, despite his inability to express it normally, we witness a healing that speaks to anyone carrying childhood wounds. This particular type of emotional resolution creates a unique brain state conducive to sleep. We experience relief from tension we might not even have realized we were holding. Beth's journey towards self-acceptance reached its most fascinating point when she encountered Space Beth. This storyline explored her deepest fears about identity and choice. Was she the real Beth or the clone? The beauty of this arc was how it ultimately led both Beths to a place of acceptance, regardless of their origin. This template for letting go of self-judgment resonates deeply with our pre-sleep thought patterns, when we're often most vulnerable to criticizing our own choices and identities. The maternal warmth Beth occasionally displays represents one of her most sleep-inducing qualities. When she comforts Morty after his heartbreak with Planetina, we see a side of her character that's been largely suppressed by her own unresolved relationship with her father. This scene is particularly effective because it shows genuine growth, Beth giving Morty the emotional support she herself never received. The circular healing in this moment creates a sense of resolution that signals to our own brains that it's safe to let go. What makes these scenes work so well for sleep induction is their rarity. If Beth were constantly nurturing and vulnerable, these moments wouldn't have the same impact. It's precisely because she normally maintains such tight control that these glimpses beneath her armor feel so significant. They create a perfect pattern of tension and release that mirrors the ideal mental state transition for falling asleep, from alertness to surrender. Beth's character also demonstrates something valuable about emotional honesty. During her rare, vulnerable moments, we see someone experiencing the relief of finally expressing feelings she's worked so hard to contain. This visual representation of emotional release serves as a powerful subconscious guide for our own pre-sleep mental state. If someone as guarded as Beth Smith can occasionally lower her defenses, perhaps we too can release the thoughts and worries keeping us awake. The episode where Beth comforts Morty after his Planetina heartbreak stands as one of the show's most emotionally resonant moments. What makes this scene particularly effective for relaxation is how it balances emotional depth with restraint. Beth doesn't suddenly transform into a completely different character. Her comfort still comes with hints of her usual awkwardness and uncertainty. This authenticity makes the emotion more believable and thus more impactful for viewers trying to quiet their own emotional noise. There's also something particularly effective about Beth's voice during these vulnerable moments. Her usual crisp, slightly defensive tone softens, creating a vocal pattern that works exceptionally well as an audio cue for relaxation. The contrast between her normal speech patterns and these gentler moments creates a noticeable shift that signals to our brains that it's time to transition to a different state, exactly what we need to drift towards sleep. The complexity of Beth's character creates an interesting psychological effect for viewers. When we see someone typically so armored finally expose their vulnerabilities, it creates a sense of trust and intimacy that's particularly conducive to sleep. These moments trigger a subconscious response. If this guarded person feels safe enough to lower their defenses, perhaps we too can safely surrender to sleep without maintaining our own vigilance. Beth's journey of self-discovery, particularly after meeting Space Beth, offers another valuable template for pre-sleep mental processing. Her gradual movement toward accepting herself, flaws, unrealized potential, and all, mirrors the kind of self-compassion that sleep experts often recommend cultivating before bed. When we see Beth find peace with her choices and identity, it creates a powerful model for releasing our own self-judgment as we prepare for sleep. The power of Beth's vulnerable moments extends beyond just emotional catharsis. These scenes often feature some of the show's most thoughtful dialogue, creating a particular kind of cognitive engagement that's ideal for the transition to sleep. Unlike the show's more frenetic adventure sequences, these quieter character moments engage our minds in a gentler way, giving us something meaningful to focus on without overstimulating our brains. From Beth's thoughtful moments, we turn to a character whose entire existence is paradoxically both painful and purposeful. Mr. Meeseeks may seem like an odd choice for a sleep companion with his bright blue appearance and often frantic energy, but there's something hypnotically soothing about these simple creatures that makes them surprisingly effective companions for your journey to dreamland. Have you ever noticed how the phrase, "I'm Mr. Meeseeks, look at me," starts to take on an almost musical quality the more you hear it? That's not just coincidence. The repetitive nature of Mr. Meeseeks' catchphrases serves a dual purpose beyond just making us laugh. These simple, predictable verbal patterns actually create a rhythmic quality that works similarly to counting sheep or listening to a gentle mantra. As strange as it sounds, hearing "I'm Mr. Meeseeks, look at me" multiple times in succession can lull your brain into that perfect pre-sleep state. What makes Mr. Meeseeks such a fascinating paradox is his cheerful acceptance of his own brief existence. These blue creatures are created for a single purpose: accomplish their task, or die trying, and then happily disappear. While this might seem disturbing in concept, there's something oddly comforting about creatures who fully embrace their temporary nature and singular purpose. In a world where we're constantly juggling multiple responsibilities and worrying about the future, the Meeseeks philosophy offers a strangely appealing alternative. The psychology behind why Mr. Meeseeks works as a sleep aid goes deeper than just his catchphrases. Research indicates that repetitive phrases can effectively reduce cognitive load, essentially giving your overactive brain less to process. The simplicity of Mr. Meeseeks' character and his straightforward approach to tasks allows viewers to mentally disengage from complex thought patterns. When we're trying to fall asleep, this disengagement is exactly what we need. Consider how different Meeseeks handle various tasks throughout the show. Whether they're trying to help Jerry improve his golf game or helping Summer become popular, their approach follows the same pattern: intense focus on a single goal. This mirrors the mental state we need to achieve for sleep, letting go of our scattered thoughts and concerns to focus solely on rest. Their singular purpose becomes a model for our own transition to sleep. What's particularly interesting is how the Meeseeks philosophy toward existence creates a surprisingly effective mindset for sleep. Their acceptance of their brief existence and singular focus on completing tasks mirrors what sleep experts recommend: the ability to let go of multiple concerns and embrace the present moment. When Mr. Meeseeks proclaims, "Existence is pain," it's not just darkly funny, it's acknowledging something we all experience but rarely express so directly. That acknowledgement can be strangely liberating as we try to quiet our minds. The delivery of these catchphrases enhances their effectiveness as sleep aids. The Meeseeks speak with an urgent enthusiasm that somehow transforms into something meditative when heard repeatedly. Their voices maintain a consistent tone and pattern that your brain can easily predict and follow, creating a sense of security and familiarity. Unlike the show's more chaotic characters, Mr. Meeseeks provides a predictable auditory experience that signals to your brain it's safe to relax. The contrast between the Meeseeks' bright, cheerful appearance and their existential awareness creates a cognitive dissonance that's oddly soothing. They package serious, philosophical concepts in a non-threatening, almost childlike presentation. This combination allows us to engage with deep ideas while maintaining emotional distance, perfect for the transitional state between wakefulness and sleep where we want something to think about without becoming too stimulated. Look at the famous golf episode where multiple Meeseeks are created to help Jerry improve his game. As they grow increasingly desperate to complete their task, their repeated phrases and escalating distress might seem like the opposite of calming. Yet there's something almost hypnotic about their collective chanting and singular focus. Their plight represents an exaggerated version of our own struggle to let go of problems we can't immediately solve, something we must do to fall asleep. The me-seek's entire existence follows what could be considered a perfect sleep formula. They appear when needed, focus entirely on their purpose without distraction, and then peacefully disappear when their job is complete. This life cycle mirrors what happens during healthy sleep. We disconnect from daily concerns, rest completely, and then return to our responsibilities refreshed. Their philosophy of existence is pain acknowledges the struggles we all face while offering a template for temporary release. When a me-seeks completes its task and disappears with a contented poof, there's a sense of satisfaction and release that's particularly conducive to sleep. This resolution provides closure, something our brains crave before being able to fully relax. The me-seeks demonstrate that problems can be solved, tasks can be completed, and afterward, you can simply let go. The perfect metaphor for transitioning from the concerns of the day to the peace of sleep. The mantra-like quality of Mr. Me-seek's repeated phrases creates a meditative backdrop that helps quiet the overthinking mind. Research has shown that mantras work by giving the brain a simple task to focus on, preventing it from cycling through worries and plans. When you hear, "I'm Mr. Me-seek's, look at me," repeated with slight variations throughout an episode, your brain begins to anticipate the pattern, creating a sense of order that counteracts the chaos of racing thoughts. Some of the most oddly peaceful moments in the series come from scenes featuring multiple me-seeks interacting with each other. Their synchronized responses and shared purpose create a harmonious quality that's surprisingly soothing. Even when they're in distress, there's something calming about creatures who are all experiencing the same thing simultaneously. It creates a sense of unity and shared experience that can help us feel less alone with our own thoughts as we drift towards sleep. The me-seek's acceptance of mortality offers a philosophical comfort that's particularly valuable for nighttime overthinking. Their awareness that they will cease to exist once their purpose is fulfilled doesn't cause them anxiety. It's simply a fact of their existence that they fully embrace. This perspective can help us temporarily release our own existential concerns, enabling the mental surrender necessary for sleep. In our daily lives, we rarely encounter such single-minded purpose. We're constantly balancing competing priorities, worrying about past decisions, and planning for future events. The me-seeks represent a temporary escape from this complexity. They demonstrate what it looks like to focus completely on one thing without distraction. This mental state mirrors what sleep experts recommend for overcoming insomnia: the ability to let go of everything except the present moment. From the me-seek's singular purpose, we now transition to something entirely different: a being that exists as thousands yet speaks as one. What if the secret to perfect sleep wasn't found in silence, but rather in the gentle hum of countless voices united as a single entity? Unity's collective consciousness offers exactly this paradoxical comfort: the sound of many becoming one. Unity stands in fascinating contrast to Mr. Me-seek's. While the blue helper creature represents complete focus on a single task, Unity embodies something far more expansive: the dissolution of individual identity into something greater. This hive mind character controls entire planets of beings who think, speak, and act in perfect harmony. And surprisingly, this concept translates into one of the show's most unexpectedly soothing audio experiences. When Unity speaks through multiple bodies simultaneously, it creates a unique sound. Not the jarring cacophony you might expect, but rather a soft, harmonious murmur. These overlapping voices blend together into something almost musical. The collective voice has an ambient quality that brain researchers have found particularly conducive to sleep, similar to what sleep scientists call pink noise, a frequency pattern that promotes deeper sleep cycles. Think about those moments when you're in a coffee shop or restaurant, when the distant conversations of others create a gentle background buzz. That sound often proves more relaxing than complete silence. Our prehistoric brains are wired to find comfort in the distant sound of human voices. It signals safety in numbers without demanding our direct attention or response. Unity's collective voice taps into this primal comfort mechanism perfectly. The relationship between Rick and Unity explores fascinating themes that work surprisingly well as pre-sleep contemplation. Their connection is intellectually stimulating without being overly activating. Exactly what you want during that transitional state between wakefulness and sleep. Their interactions explore loneliness, connection, and what it means to truly know another being. These philosophical questions engage our minds just enough to distract from daily worries without being so stimulating that they keep us awake. In the episode Autoerotic Assimilation, we witness Rick's complex relationship with Unity unfold. What makes this storyline particularly effective for sleep is how it balances intellectual engagement with emotional resonance. The episode raises fascinating questions about individuality versus collectivism, yet does so through a personal relationship story that speaks to our basic human needs for belonging and understanding. Unity's very nature represents something many insomniacs desperately seek: an escape from individual consciousness. When we struggle to fall asleep, we're often trapped in our own thoughts, unable to quiet our individual worries and concerns. Unity offers a template for what letting go might feel like: the blissful surrender of personal concerns to become part of something larger. This mirrors the process of falling asleep itself, where we gradually release our grip on conscious thought and allow ourselves to drift into a different state of awareness. The gentle auditory experience of Unity's collective voice works on multiple sensory levels. Many viewers report that the sound of multiple synchronized voices creates an effect similar to ASMR, that tingling sensation triggered by certain sounds that many find deeply relaxing. Unity's harmonized speech patterns deliver this calming auditory experience without requiring any fancy equipment or special techniques, just the natural sound of many voices speaking as one. What's particularly effective about Unity as a sleep aid is how the character transforms what could be a disturbing concept, loss of individuality, into something strangely comforting. During waking hours, most of us fiercely protect our sense of self and unique identity. But as we prepare for sleep, that same individualism often becomes the barrier preventing rest. Our personal worries, unique stresses, and individual responsibilities keep our minds racing. Unity shows us what it might feel like to temporarily surrender those concerns. The episode featuring Unity explores what happens when Rick, a character defined by his fierce independence and intellectual superiority, confronts a being that challenges his individualistic worldview. Their relationship dynamic isn't just entertaining. It creates a perfect philosophical backdrop for contemplation as you drift toward sleep. Is unity better than individuality? Is connection worth the sacrifice of autonomy? These questions have no simple answers, allowing your mind to engage without demanding resolution. Perhaps most significantly, Unity addresses one of our deepest human needs: the desire for connection without the complications that typically accompany it. In our waking lives, relationships require effort, communication, compromise. Unity represents a fantasy of perfect understanding. Thousands of minds thinking as one, with no miscommunication or conflict. This idealized connection speaks to our longing for belonging without the work normally required to achieve it. Even the visual representation of Unity contributes to the character's effectiveness as a sleep aid. The purple-hued beings with glowing eyes create a consistent color palette that's visually soothing without being jarring. The unified movements of multiple bodies create a hypnotic effect similar to watching waves on the ocean or leaves rustling in the wind, natural patterns that have long been used to induce relaxation. The fact that Unity eventually chooses to end her relationship with Rick adds another layer of complexity that works well for pre-sleep reflection. She realizes that Rick's chaotic influence disrupts her collective harmony, a powerful metaphor for how certain relationships can interfere with our ability to maintain inner peace. This bittersweet conclusion avoids the overstimulation of a dramatic ending, while still providing emotional satisfaction and closure. For those struggling with insomnia due to feelings of isolation or loneliness, Unity's episodes offer particular comfort. The character embodies the ultimate connection, a being that is never truly alone because it exists as many simultaneously. This fantasy of perfect belonging addresses the loneliness that often intensifies during nighttime hours when external distractions fade away. The technical aspects of Unity's voice performance enhance this effect. The slightly echoing quality of overlapping voices creates an audio experience that feels expansive yet intimate. This combination helps create the perfect auditory environment for drifting off, present enough to distract from intrusive thoughts, but gentle enough not to demand active listening. Unity also demonstrates something sleep researchers have long understood: that the transition to sleep involves a gradual surrender of conscious control. Just as Unity's individual components yield their autonomy to the collective, we must release our grip on waking consciousness to enter sleep. The character serves as a model for this surrender, showing that letting go doesn't have to be frightening. It can be a pathway to harmony. While Unity's hive mind might seem like science fiction, it actually parallels natural phenomena that humans have found comforting for millennia. The synchronized movements of bird flocks, the collective hum of insect colonies, the coordinated actions of schools of fish. These natural examples of unified consciousness have always fascinated and soothed human observers. Unity taps into this same primal appreciation for collective harmony. While Unity shows us the comfort in losing individual identity, Space Beth reveals something equally powerful: the strange peace that comes from accepting multiple versions of yourself. In those quiet moments before sleep when your mind races with doubts about your life choices, Space Beth's storyline offers an unexpected template for finding calm. When Rick created two identical Beths and allowed one to choose space adventure while the other remained on Earth with her family, he inadvertently created the perfect metaphor for our late-night what-if questions. Haven't we all stared at the ceiling wondering about the roads not taken? The career paths, relationships, or adventures we passed up in favor of our current lives? Space Beth's character gives us a unique perspective on these questions. She's essentially a walking, talking version of Earth Beth's road not taken, the adventurous, independent life path that regular Beth sometimes regrets not choosing. But rather than this creating endless torment, which might keep us awake, the show takes an interesting turn. When both Beths finally meet, we don't get the catastrophic identity crisis we might expect. Instead, we witness something that psychologists might call radical acceptance. Though their lifestyles couldn't be more different. One battling galactic threats while the other manages a suburban household, both women recognize themselves in each other. They accept that both versions are equally valid expressions of who they are. This is where Space Beth becomes surprisingly effective as a sleep aid. Her storyline suggests that maybe we don't need to resolve every what if before we can rest. Maybe both versions of ourselves, the one who took that job and the one who didn't, the one who moved abroad and the one who stayed home, are equally authentic. Both paths have value. The episodes featuring both Beths together create a uniquely balanced energy that models what our minds need for sleep. Think about it: space. Beth brings the excitement and adventure our imagination craves, while Earth Beth grounds us in the familiar and domestic. This balanced perspective helps quiet the mental back and forth that often keeps us awake. What's particularly effective about Space Beth's character is her confident acceptance of uncertainty. When neither Beth knows which is the clone, rather than this causing existential terror, Space Beth shrugs it off with remarkable ease. She embodies a perspective that sleep experts often recommend, accepting that some questions simply don't need immediate answers. This acceptance extends beyond just her identity and into her relationships. Despite her tough exterior, Space Beth shows surprising moments of tenderness in her interactions with the Smith family. When she returns to Earth, she doesn't reject her family connections or treat them as less important than her space adventures. Instead, she integrates both aspects of her life, showing us that we don't have to choose between being a family person or an independent spirit. These moments of unexpected warmth, like when she connects with Earth Beth or shows affection toward the family she technically left behind, create emotional resolution that's perfect for pre-sleep viewing. They remind us that even when we make difficult choices, we don't necessarily lose the connections that matter. Sleep researchers have found that philosophical questions explored from a safe distance can actually facilitate the transition to sleep. Space Beth's storyline does exactly this. It lets us contemplate profound questions about identity and choice without requiring us to make any decisions ourselves. We can simply observe as both Beths navigate their parallel lives, finding the harmonious mental state that promotes sleep. What makes this particularly effective is that Space Beth doesn't just represent the road not taken, she embodies acceptance of that duality. Unlike characters tortured by their choices, she moves forward without regret. She doesn't waste energy wondering if she should have stayed on Earth, just as Earth Beth gradually stops torturing herself about not choosing adventure. This mental framework is precisely what sleep experts recommend for people plagued by rumination at bedtime. The visual and auditory elements of Space Beth's scenes also contribute to their sleep-inducing quality. While her adventures might seem action-packed, they're often presented with a balance of excitement and quieter moments of reflection. Her voice maintains the familiar Beth cadence that our brains recognize, but with subtle differences that create interest without jarring us awake. Consider the episodes where both Beths interact with the family. These scenes blend the excitement of space adventure with the familiar comfort of domestic life. This balanced energy creates a perfect transitional state for the mind, engaged enough to stop worrying about your own problems, but not so stimulated that sleep becomes impossible. For viewers who struggle with perfectionism or decision anxiety before bed, Space Beth offers particular comfort. Her storyline suggests that perhaps our choices don't permanently define us, that multiple versions of ourselves can exist simultaneously, each with their own value. This perspective takes the pressure off our daily decisions, making it easier to surrender to sleep. It's worth noting how Space Beth's relationship with uncertainty differs from other characters in the show. While Rick battles the multiverse with scientific certainty and Morty often collapses under existential dread, Space Beth demonstrates a middle path, acknowledging life's fundamental uncertainties while continuing to move forward with confidence. This balanced approach mirrors what mindfulness experts recommend for healthy sleep patterns. The quiet strength Space Beth displays when facing questions about her authenticity provides a template for viewers dealing with their own identity questions. If you've ever lain awake wondering, am I really happy with my choices? Or is this really who I'm supposed to be? Swing space. Beth's attitude offers an alternative to endless rumination. She shows that maybe the answer isn't resolving the question, but finding peace with the uncertainty itself. Even Space Beth's wardrobe and aesthetic contribute to this dual energy. Her tough space outfit maintains elements of Earth Beth's appearance, visually representing how we can integrate different aspects of ourselves rather than viewing them as contradictions. This visual harmony supports the psychological state conducive to drifting off to sleep. Fans have noted that episodes featuring both Beths create a particularly effective viewing experience for bedtime. The blend of high-concept sci-fi with grounded family dynamics creates a narrative rhythm that keeps you engaged enough to stop worrying about tomorrow's tasks, but not so intensely that your mind stays alert and active. What's most soothing about Space Beth's character arc is that it doesn't require resolution of her identity question to find peace. She doesn't need to know definitively whether she's the clone to continue her life with confidence. This models exactly the mental state we need for sleep, the ability to set aside questions that don't have immediate answers and find peace in the present moment. Setting aside unanswerable questions is one path to mental peace, but Bird Person offers us a completely different approach. In a show filled with characters who speak in riddles, jokes, and sarcasm, his literal communication style stands as a strange oasis of clarity. And there's something about this straightforward honesty that our exhausted brains seem to crave right before sleep. When we first encounter Bird Person, his stoic demeanor might seem off-putting, even cold. He doesn't laugh at jokes, rarely changes his facial expression, and never softens his messages with social niceties. Yet, as we spend more time with him, this very quality becomes surprisingly soothing. In a world where we constantly have to decode what people really mean, Bird Person's literal communication eliminates the exhausting mental gymnastics of interpretation. This effect becomes especially apparent in his friendship with Rick, where most relationships in the show rely on manipulation, hidden agendas, or emotional games. Bird Person and Rick share something refreshingly different. Their bond doesn't require the constant emotional performance that keeps our minds racing at night, wondering if we said the right thing or what someone really meant by their comment. Instead, we see an authentic connection between two characters that cuts through the chaos of their universe with simple honesty. Think about your most restless nights. How often are they fueled by replaying conversations, analyzing subtext, or trying to decipher what someone really meant? Bird Person's communication style offers a compelling alternative. What if people just said exactly what they meant, without layers of irony, manipulation, or hidden messages? The mental relief would be immediate. One of Bird Person's most memorable lines perfectly captures this approach. In bird culture, this is considered a dick move. This straightforward moral clarity cuts through ethical ambiguity with an almost humorous simplicity. There's no need for elaborate justification or philosophical debate. Some actions are simply wrong, and Bird Person has no trouble saying so. When our minds are racing with ethical dilemmas or social anxieties at bedtime, this kind of clear judgment can be surprisingly comforting. Bird Person's literal interpretation of language also provides an unexpected sleep benefit. When Rick sarcastically tells him, "Bird Person, you're looking well," he responds with complete sincerity, "I am in good health." This absence of irony means there's nothing to decode, no hidden meanings to analyze. For overactive minds prone to overthinking, this represents a significant reduction in cognitive load right when we need it most, as we're trying to power down for sleep. We can actually see how this works in episodes where other characters interact with Bird Person. Their complex emotions and manipulative communication tactics bounce off his literal shield, often forcing them to simplify their approach and state their actual needs directly. Watch how even Rick, master of sarcasm and emotional deflection, tends to speak more plainly when conversing with Bird Person. This simplification effect is precisely what our brains need as we transition from waking complexity to sleep. The contrast between Bird Person's speech patterns and our own internal monologues is particularly striking. Most of us experience a constant stream of what sleep experts call rumination, cycling through worries, replaying conversations, imagining scenarios, and analyzing social interactions. This mental chatter keeps our brains in high-activity mode, preventing the natural wind-down necessary for sleep. Bird Person's approach suggests an alternative. What if we could simply state the facts of our situation without emotional embellishment or catastrophizing? Even Bird Person's physical presence conveys this calming simplicity. His movements are deliberate and minimal, his facial expressions restrained, his posture consistently upright. There's no wasted energy or dramatic gestures. Everything serves a purpose. This economy of expression mirrors what sleep experts recommend for pre-sleep mental states, reducing unnecessary mental activity to conserve energy for rest. His character development throughout the series also follows a surprisingly soothing arc. From stoic warrior to husband and eventually father, Bird Person evolves while maintaining his essential calm nature. Even after being killed and resurrected as Phoenix Person, he eventually reclaims his identity without dramatic existential crises. This consistency amid change demonstrates an approach to life's transitions that doesn't require the anxious overthinking that often keeps us awake. Perhaps the most sleep-inducing aspect of Bird Person is how he handles information. In our information-saturated world, we're constantly bombarded with data that our brains feel compelled to process, categorize, and respond to. This information overload is a major contributor to sleep difficulties. Bird Person, by contrast, processes only what's necessary and disregards the rest. He doesn't engage with gossip, doesn't perpetuate rumors, and doesn't elaborate beyond what's required. This selective information processing is exactly what sleep experts recommend for healthy sleep hygiene. The scenes featuring Bird Person often have a distinct visual and auditory quality as well. His home environment is minimal and functional, without distracting elements. His voice maintains a consistent, measured cadence that never spikes in volume or pitch. Even the background music in his scenes tends toward ambient, steady tones rather than dramatic swells. These production elements unconsciously signal to our brains that it's safe to relax. No sudden stimuli will demand our attention. Even Bird Person's love story offers an instructive template for bedtime mental states. When he falls in love with Tammy, before her betrayal is revealed, their relationship lacks the dramatic ups and downs that characterize most romantic plotlines. There are no tearful misunderstandings, no passionate reconciliations. Just two beings who communicate their interests directly and act accordingly. While this might seem unexciting by conventional storytelling standards, it presents a model of emotional regulation that sleep experts consistently recommend. Interestingly, many viewers report that Bird Person's communication style becomes more appealing the more tired they are. When our cognitive resources are depleted after a long day, the effort required to parse complex social dynamics feels increasingly burdensome. Bird Person's directness offers a respite from this social processing tax, allowing our exhausted brains to conserve energy for the transition to sleep. The episodes where Bird Person is injured or in danger create a unique emotional response as well. Unlike the frenetic pace of most action sequences in the show, these moments often slow down, focusing on methodical problem-solving rather than hysteria. Even in crisis, Bird Person maintains his composure, demonstrating that emergency doesn't always require panic. A powerful message for anxiety-prone minds at bedtime. What makes Bird Person particularly effective as a sleep aid is that his communication doesn't demand a response. Much of our mental restlessness comes from feeling that we need to formulate replies, defend positions, or prepare explanations. Bird Person's statements stand complete in themselves. They don't implicitly ask for agreement, argument, or elaboration. This quality reduces the conversational burden on our minds, allowing us to simply receive information without feeling obligated to process it further. Unlike Bird Person's emotional consistency, Rick's facade of cynical detachment occasionally shatters to reveal something far more profound. Have you ever wondered why watching The Smartest Man in the Multiverse breakdown might actually help you fall asleep? These moments of raw emotional honesty create a strange kind of permission. If Rick Sanchez can finally admit he needs connection, perhaps we can stop fighting our own vulnerabilities long enough to drift off. Rick Sanchez is a man perpetually in motion. He's constantly building inventions, hopping dimensions, and dragging Morty into chaotic adventures. But it's when the universe's most brilliant mind finally stops running that we witness something truly special. Behind his lab coat and flask lies a man struggling with profound loneliness, and there's something uniquely calming about watching him finally acknowledge it. Think about the moment after Unity breaks up with Rick. The scene unfolds with painful slowness as Rick returns home alone, assembles a complex death machine, and positions himself to end it all. The machine activates, but Rick passes out seconds before it fires. No jokes, no sarcasm, just the raw reality of a man who can't bear his own company when stripped of distractions. This quiet sequence communicates volumes about Rick's inner turmoil without a single word of dialogue. What's fascinating about these vulnerable moments is how they contrast with Rick's usual persona. Most of the time, he's constantly asserting his intellectual superiority, dismissing emotions as chemical reactions, and maintaining ironic distance from everything and everyone. When those defenses suddenly drop, the effect is powerful enough to command our complete attention. And paradoxically, this focused attention on someone else's emotional release can help quiet our own racing thoughts. The beauty of Rick's vulnerable moments is that they're never predictable. Sometimes they appear in the aftermath of great loss. Other times they emerge unexpectedly in quiet conversations. This unpredictability mirrors our own emotional lives. We rarely schedule our breakdowns. They tend to arrive precisely when we've run out of energy to suppress them. By witnessing Rick's emotions break through at unexpected moments, we're reminded of the futility of our own emotional armor. Rick's relationship with Morty reveals layers to his character that his scientific genius tries to obscure. Despite constantly berating and endangering his grandson, Rick has repeatedly put himself in harm's way to protect him. These sacrifices speak louder than his verbal abuse ever could, showing a complex bond that transcends their chaotic adventures. In these moments, we see the true Rick, not just the smartest man in the multiverse, but someone capable of genuine care and connection. When Rick confronts the Rick who killed his family, we catch glimpses of motivation beyond his typical cynical persona. These revelations aren't delivered through convenient exposition, but through subtle visual cues and emotional reactions that reward attentive viewing. Watching Rick navigate loss while maintaining his guarded exterior creates a unique emotional resonance. We recognize the universal experience of carrying pain while trying to function normally in the world. The musical choices that accompany Rick's emotional moments deserve special attention. After his most intense breakdowns, the show often transitions to hauntingly beautiful musical selections that enhance the emotional weight of these scenes. This combination of visual vulnerability and evocative music creates a deeply soothing atmosphere. There's something about witnessing someone else process difficult emotions through silence and music that allows us to vicariously release our own tensions without having to actively engage with them. These vulnerable moments offer viewers a unique psychological benefit before sleep. When we witness characters experiencing emotional catharsis, our brains can process similar feelings, without directly confronting our own issues. It's a form of emotional processing by proxy. Rick handles the hard work of emotional expression while we benefit from the release. This vicarious processing can be particularly effective before sleep when direct confrontation with our own problems might keep us awake. Rick's moments of vulnerability also give us permission to acknowledge our own limitations. In a culture that often celebrates stoicism and self-reliance, seeing even the most capable fictional character admit weakness can be profoundly freeing. If the smartest man in the multiverse occasionally needs help, perhaps our own struggles aren't signs of failure but simply part of being human. This realization can help quiet the self-critical voice that often grows louder as we try to fall asleep. The rarity of these moments makes them particularly effective. If Rick were constantly emotional, the impact would diminish. Instead, each vulnerable scene feels earned and authentic precisely because they're so uncommon. This pattern mirrors good sleep hygiene. Emotional processing is necessary, but constant emotional activation prevents rest. Rick's pattern of long periods of controlled behavior, punctuated by brief moments of emotional release, demonstrates a rhythm that's actually conducive to healthy sleep cycles. One particularly powerful example occurs after Rick turns himself in to the Galactic Federation to save his family. As he sits in prison, his face reveals a complex mix of resignation and resolve. There's no witty one-liner, no clever escape plan immediately set in motion. Just a man accepting the consequences of his choices to protect those he cares about. This quiet acceptance of limitations, even temporarily, models the mental surrender we need to transition from wakefulness to sleep. Rick's self-awareness about his emotional defenses adds another layer to these vulnerable moments. He understands exactly what he's doing when he pushes people away, medicates his feelings with alcohol, or hides behind sarcasm. This consciousness of his own patterns creates moments of startling clarity when he occasionally acknowledges them. "I'm a terrible person," he admits in one particularly honest moment. This kind of self-awareness without immediate self-improvement is remarkably human, and seeing it modeled can help us be gentler with our own imperfections as we drift towards sleep. The transitory nature of Rick's vulnerable moments also serves an important function. He never permanently transforms into an emotionally available person. The walls eventually come back up. This cycle reflects the reality of emotional growth. It rarely happens in a single breakthrough moment, but rather through a series of advances and retreats. By showing emotional vulnerability as part of an ongoing process rather than a permanent state, the show offers a realistic model that's actually more comforting than stories of complete transformation. What makes Rick's emotional moments particularly suited for sleep induction is their combination of intellectual and emotional content. They engage both the analytical mind, through their complexity and nuance, and the emotional mind, through their raw honesty. This dual engagement helps transition the brain from active problem-solving to the integrative thought patterns that precede sleep. We're not just feeling with Rick, we're thinking about those feelings in a way that satisfies both aspects of consciousness before surrendering to unconsciousness. Sleep experts often recommend emotional containment before bed, acknowledging feelings without becoming overwhelmed by them. Rick's vulnerable moments demonstrate this containment perfectly. His breakdowns are powerful, but brief, revealing deep emotion without indulging in endless processing. This model of feeling deeply but temporarily creates a template for healthy emotional regulation that's particularly valuable in the pre-sleep period when uncontained emotions can lead to hours of rumination. From emotional containment to existential surrender, Rick and Morty's nihilism offers us something surprisingly valuable when we're struggling to quiet our minds. In a universe with infinite dimensions and possibilities, your daily worries and tomorrow's meeting shrink to microscopic proportions, creating the perfect mental conditions for drifting into unconsciousness. The show's nihilistic philosophy might seem like the last thing you'd want to contemplate before bed. After all, the idea that nothing matters sounds depressing on the surface. But Rick and Morty transforms this potentially bleak outlook into something strangely comforting through its unique blend of humor and genuine emotional moments. Remember that powerful scene where Rick and Morty literally bury their own dead bodies after destroying their original universe? It's a perfect encapsulation of the show's approach to cosmic horror, acknowledging the absurdity and terror of existence while simultaneously showing that life continues despite it all. As they shovel dirt over their own corpses and silently return to their new home, we're left with a strangely peaceful feeling. If Rick and Morty can move forward after literally destroying their universe, maybe we can stop obsessing over that embarrassing thing we said at work yesterday. The brilliance of this approach is that it doesn't deny our problems or tell us to simply think positive. Instead, it puts our anxieties in cosmic perspective. That presentation you're worried about? In an infinite multiverse, there are versions of you giving that presentation perfectly and versions bombing it catastrophically. And ultimately, neither outcome changes the vast indifference of the cosmos. This perspective shift can be incredibly liberating when you're staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., mind racing with worries. Morty's character development throughout the series demonstrates this philosophical growth beautifully. Early in the show, he's constantly overwhelmed by the horrors he witnesses. But as seasons progress, we see him develop a more balanced perspective. His speech to Summer about finding joy, despite cosmic meaninglessness, stands as one of the most genuinely comforting moments in the entire series. When he tells her, "Nobody exists on purpose, nobody belongs anywhere, everybody's gonna die, come watch TV," he's not being depressing. He's offering a path to freedom from existential angst. This is the paradoxical gift of Rick and Morty's nihilism. By acknowledging the vastness and indifference of existence, we're freed from the crushing weight of feeling like everything matters too much. Sleep experts have noted that catastrophizing, making everything seem like a disaster, is one of the primary thought patterns that keeps us awake. The show's philosophical stance directly counteracts this tendency. What makes these moments particularly effective for sleep is that they often occur during the show's quietest scenes. The loud adventures and fast-paced jokes give way to contemplative moments where characters simply exist in the aftermath of cosmic revelations. These quieter scenes create the perfect rhythm for drifting towards sleep, engaging enough to distract from your own anxieties, but calm enough to allow your mind to begin shutting down. The show balances its existential nihilism with genuine heart, transforming what could be a depressing outlook into a strangely comforting perspective. We see this in countless scenes where characters confront their own insignificance but find solace in their relationships. This balance creates a philosophical middle ground that's both intellectually stimulating and emotionally satisfying, exactly what we need to engage our minds just enough to stop ruminating on daily worries, without becoming too stimulated to sleep. Research suggests this perspective shift can be genuinely effective for sleep. When we put our problems in cosmic perspective, we activate parts of the brain associated with abstract thinking rather than emotional processing. This shift in brain activity can reduce the emotional charge of our worries, making it easier to disengage from them as we drift towards sleep. It's not about denying our problems exist. It's about temporarily stepping back from them to see their relative insignificance in the grand scheme. The show's philosophical approach resonates particularly well at bedtime because it mirrors what happens naturally as we fall asleep. During the transition to sleep, our brains gradually surrender conscious control, moving from specific worries to more abstract thoughts before disengaging from conscious thought entirely. The show's existential themes facilitate this natural progression, helping us move from "I need to finish that report tomorrow" to In an infinite multiverse, one report doesn't define my existence to peaceful unconsciousness. Some of the most sleep-inducing philosophical moments come when the show acknowledges the vastness of existence while still finding value in human connection. The episode where Rick shows Morty the graves of their alternate selves demonstrates this perfectly. Yes, they've destroyed one universe and simply moved to another where they conveniently died, suggesting the meaninglessness of individual existence. But they're still together, still a family navigating this cosmic absurdity as a unit. This thematic exploration creates a uniquely effective form of comfort for viewers. Unlike traditional comfort media that simply avoids difficult topics, Rick and Morty acknowledges them fully but puts them in perspective. This approach can be particularly valuable for overthinkers who can't simply turn off their existential awareness at bedtime. Rather than fighting against philosophical thoughts, the show channels them toward acceptance and eventual rest. The quieter scenes that acknowledge the vastness of existence while still finding value in human connection create a perfect philosophical backdrop for surrendering to sleep. They allow us to process our existential anxieties from a safe distance through fictional characters rather than getting caught in our own ruminations. This indirect approach to processing deep fears often works better than direct attempts to stop thinking about it. Rick's nihilism might initially seem like the antithesis of a comforting bedtime story, but it's consistently balanced by the show's emphasis on family connections. Even as Rick proclaims that nothing matters, his actions repeatedly demonstrate that he values his relationship with Morty and the Smith family. This contradiction creates a rich philosophical space that acknowledges both the cosmic insignificance of our lives and the subjective significance of our connections. A perfect mindset for releasing the day's stresses as we prepare for sleep. The beauty of using Rick and Morty's existential themes as sleep aids is that they don't deny the complexity of existence or offer simplistic solutions. Instead, they acknowledge the absurdity and potential meaninglessness of life while suggesting that we can find peace within that awareness rather than despite it. This mirrors what sleep experts often recommend: not fighting against difficult thoughts, but accepting them and allowing them to pass. For viewers struggling with perfectionism or anxiety, these themes can be particularly soothing. If nothing ultimately matters in a cosmic sense, then perhaps we can forgive ourselves for our imperfections and mistakes. This self-compassion is essential for quality sleep, as self-critical thoughts are among the most common barriers to falling asleep. As we close our journey through the multiverse, it's worth noting that there's actual science behind why we're drawn to these dysfunctional characters at bedtime. Research shows that familiar media genuinely helps us transition to sleep. It's why so many people put on comfort shows like Rick and Morty when they need to unwind. These characters become sleep companions in the most literal sense, creating a bridge between consciousness and dreams. What's fascinating is how the show's philosophical underpinnings work their way into our subconscious. Many viewers report that Rick and Morty doesn't just entertain them, it actually changes how they view their own relationships and existence. The show's willingness to stare into the abyss of meaninglessness somehow makes our own midnight anxieties feel more manageable. So tonight, whether you find comfort in Jerry's simple pleasures, Beth's quiet strength, or even Rick's nihilistic brilliance, remember, in this vast multiverse where nothing matters, choosing to fall asleep to the adventures of this bizarre family might be the perfect meaningless act that paradoxically gives your rest real meaning.